The pen was less than an inch from my hand when I realized Emily wasn't asking for a divorce. She was asking me to sign away the truth. It sat there on our dining room table, silver, expensive, perfectly placed between the divorce papers and her untouched glass of water. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the soft tick of the wall clock above the pantry door. 9:17 on a Thursday night. That was the time my marriage stopped looking like a marriage and started looking like a trap. Emily sat across from me in a white maternity dress, one hand resting on her 7-month pregnant belly like a shield. Her face was calm in that polished way people get when they have practiced a conversation too many times in the mirror. Behind her, her mother, Patricia, stood near the china cabinet with her arms folded, watching me like I was already guilty of something. On the table were 26 pages of legal language, highlighted tabs, initials marked in yellow, and one sentence Emily had repeated 3 times since I walked through the door. Just sign it, Mark. It is the decent thing to do. Decent. That word nearly made me laugh, but I did not laugh. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam my fist on the table. Men like me learn early that anger gives people something to point at. So I sat still, in my work shirt that still smelled faintly of sawdust and concrete dust from the job site, and I looked at the document she wanted me to sign before dinner had even gone cold. Divorce, temporary support, medical expenses, exclusive use of the house, legal acknowledgement of the child, no request for paternity testing before or after birth. That last line was the one that changed the temperature in the room. I had read building contracts for 15 years. I knew when a sentence carried more weight than it wanted you to notice. Emily's eyes flicked down to the page, then back to me. Her voice softened, but not with love. With strategy. You do not want to make this ugly while I am pregnant, do you? Patricia exhaled sharply behind her, as if my silence offended her. Mark, she said, good men protect mothers. Good men do not humiliate them with suspicion. I looked at my wedding ring, then at Emily's stomach, then at the pen again. It looked harmless. Just metal, ink, and a tiny black tip. But in that moment, it felt heavier than every steel beam I had ever inspected. One signature, and I would become the legal father of a child she refused to let me question. One signature, and the house I spent years paying for would become a waiting room for a future I might not belong to. One signature, and whatever secret lived behind Emily's calm little smile would be buried under my name. She pushed the pen closer with 2 fingers. Her nails were pale pink, freshly done. I remembered when those same hands used to reach for mine across grocery store parking lots, back when love felt simple and Arizona sunsets made our ordinary life look golden. Now those hands were sliding a document toward me like a closing door. Sign it, she whispered. For the baby. That was when the doorbell rang. Not loud, not dramatic, just one clean chime cutting through the room. Emily froze. Patricia turned toward the hallway. I did not move, because for the first time all night, I knew something they did not. I had not come home unprepared. The doorbell stayed in the air for half a second longer than it should have, like the house itself was waiting to see who would breathe first. Emily looked at me, and for the first time that night, the calm mask on her face cracked at the edges. Before I tell you who was standing on the porch, I need to explain how we got to that dining room, that pen, and those 26 pages that were supposed to turn me into a signature with a wallet. 8 months earlier, I was still the kind of man who believed his life made sense. My name is Mark Reynolds. I was 39 years old, a construction engineer in Phoenix, Arizona, and I made my living trusting things most people never noticed. Concrete load, soil reports, steel connections, wind ratings. If a beam was off by half an inch, I saw it. If a foundation line shifted, I felt it before anyone else cared. That was my job. Find the weakness before the whole structure paid for it. Funny thing is, I could do that for a parking garage, a school expansion, a medical office on East Camelback Road, but I could not do it in my own marriage. Emily and I had been married for 6 years. We lived in a stucco house in Chandler with a 2-car garage, a lemon tree in the backyard, and a nursery we had painted a soft cream color on a Saturday morning when the air conditioner could barely keep up with the July heat. Back then, she laughed when I got paint on my forearm. She took a picture of me standing on a stepladder, holding a roller like I was posing for a hardware store ad. I remember her saying, "You are going to be such a good dad, Mark." I held on to that sentence longer than I should have. We had wanted a child for years, or at least I thought we had. There were doctor visits, calendars on the refrigerator, vitamins lined up by the coffee maker, quiet disappointments folded into ordinary mornings. When Emily finally told me she was pregnant, I was standing in the driveway after a 10-hour day, boots dusty, shirt sticking to my back from the desert heat. She handed me a small white gift bag. Inside was a pair of tiny socks with little yellow ducks on them. I remember sitting down right there on the garage step because my knees forgot their job. I cried before I could stop myself. Not loud, not dramatic, just the kind of silent break that comes when something you prayed for finally looks real. Emily cried too, but looking back, her tears were different. Mine came from relief. Hers looked almost like fear. At the time, I told myself pregnancy made everything emotional. I told myself a lot of things. The first few weeks were beautiful in the way beginnings usually are. We talked about names over takeout tacos. We walked through baby aisles at Target, pretending not to be overwhelmed by strollers that cost more than my first truck. We called her mother, Patricia, who screamed so loud over the phone that Emily had to hold it away from her ear. For a little while, the house felt warmer. The future had a heartbeat. Then, slowly, the doors started closing. Emily began going to appointments without me. She said my work schedule was too unpredictable. She said the clinic was busy. She said there was no point in both of us sitting in a waiting room just to hear everything was fine. I accepted it because husbands are taught that trust is love and doubt is damage. But the first crack in a structure never announces itself as a collapse. It is just a hairline. Thin, quiet, easy to paint over. Emily's first appointment without me was on a Tuesday morning in late September. I remember that because I was standing on the third floor of a half-finished office building in Tempe, watching a crane swing steel over an empty parking lot, when her text came through. Everything looks good. Baby is healthy. 4 words and 1 smiling emoji. That was it. No picture. No details. No little measurement the way expecting parents brag about. Just a clean report, like she was updating me on an oil change. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, thumb hovering over the keyboard, trying to decide whether asking for more made me a caring husband or the kind of man she had already started calling controlling. So I wrote, "That is great news. I love you both." She sent back a heart. 1 red heart. It should have felt warm. It felt like a receipt. After that, her appointments became private by default. Every time I offered to leave work early, she had a reason ready. The doctor was squeezing her in. The office only allowed 1 person that day. Patricia was driving her because it made more sense. 1 excuse is a circumstance. 3 excuses are a pattern. And patterns are what I was trained to see. The name Ryan Mercer first appeared on a sticky note stuck to our refrigerator. Dr. Mercer, 1030, Scottsdale Women's Center. I asked about it while pouring coffee before sunrise, my lunch cooler already packed by the door. Emily did not look up from her phone. "He is just the specialist they referred me to," she said. "High-risk precaution. Nothing serious." The words were supposed to comfort me, but they did the opposite. High risk was not a word you dropped into a kitchen and then stepped over like a misplaced shoe. I asked why she had not told me. She sighed, slow and tired, like my concern was another chore on her list. "Because you panic, Mark. You hear one medical term and turn into a building inspector with a blood pressure cuff." I almost smiled, because that sounded like the old Emily teasing me. But her eyes stayed flat. No warmth behind it. No softness. Just dismissal dressed up as humor. Ryan became a name that lived in small places. Ryan said the nausea might last longer. Ryan said stress is bad for the baby. Ryan said I should not lift laundry baskets. Ryan said I should avoid unnecessary conflict. She never said Dr. Mercer. Not after the first week. Just Ryan. Casual. Familiar. Like a neighbor who watered our plants. Like a man whose opinion carried more weight in my house than mine did. I told myself I was being insecure. That is what decent men do when the truth starts knocking softly. They apologize to the door for making noise. One Friday evening, I came home early with a bag from a baby store in Mesa, a small stuffed desert fox tucked inside, because Emily once said foxes were clever and loyal. I heard her laughing before I opened the kitchen door. Not polite laughter. Not the tired laugh she gave me after work. This was lighter, younger, the kind that rises before a person can stop it. When I walked in, she ended the call so fast her thumb missed the button the first time. The silence that followed had edges. She looked at the bag in my hand and said, You are home early. Not happy. Not surprised in a good way. Just caught off guard. I set the bag on the counter and asked who she was talking to. Her answer came half a beat too late. The clinic. They were confirming vitamins. Vitamins. At 7:13 on a Friday night. I nodded because I did not trust my voice. Later, when she went upstairs, I saw the stuffed fox still in the bag, tissue paper folded around it like something waiting to be wanted. That was the night I stopped feeling like an expecting father and started feeling like a visitor in a story someone else was writing. The next crack came through an email, not a confession. It was a Wednesday night in October, the kind of dry Phoenix evening where the sky turns purple over the rooftops and every garage door on the block seems to close at the same time. Emily was upstairs taking a bath, her phone on the bathroom counter, a podcast playing softly through the door. I was in the kitchen paying bills on the old laptop we both used for utilities, insurance, and the mortgage. Nothing dramatic. Nothing secret. Just another grown man moving money from one place to another and pretending stability was the same thing as peace. Then a notification slid across the corner of the screen. Scottsdale Women's Center. Updated billing statement available. I almost ignored it. Almost. But marriage teaches you the sound of ordinary things, and this did not sound ordinary. I clicked because it was our shared email, our shared insurance, our shared child, or at least that was what I still wanted to believe. The statement opened in a clean white box with blue lettering and itemized charges that meant nothing to most people. Lab work. Ultrasound review. Specialist consultation. Estimated gestational age. That last line stopped me. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower, like the numbers might rearrange themselves if I gave them a chance to be kinder. They did not. I grabbed the calendar from beside the refrigerator, the one with job deadlines, trash pickup reminders, and Emily's prenatal vitamins circled in pink marker. My finger moved across the dates. Backward. Forward. Backward again. I was not a doctor. I was not pretending to be one. But I knew timelines. I knew when I had been home and when I had been 400 miles away in Denver, sleeping in a hotel off Interstate 25 while inspecting a concrete failure at a parking structure. The date range on that statement landed right in the middle of a week I was not in Arizona. My first thought was not rage. It was math. Cold, simple math. The kind that does not care how much you love someone. I printed the statement before I could talk myself out of it, folded it once, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk under appliance manuals and old tax folders. My hands were steady. That scared me more than shaking would have. Upstairs, Emily laughed at something in her podcast. The sound floated down the hallway like life was still normal. I sat in the blue glow of the laptop and felt the room widen around me. There are moments when the truth does not kick the door in. It sits across from you quietly and waits for you to recognize it. I did not confront her that night. Confrontation gives a liar time to clean the room. Instead, I started doing what I do for a living. I documented appointment dates, phone calls that ended when I entered the room, receipts from Scottsdale when she told me she was at Patricia's house in Glendale, a coffee shop charge near the clinic at 2:46 in the afternoon, a parking garage ticket tucked into the side pocket of her purse, stamped the same day. She said she was too exhausted to leave the house. None of it proved everything, but it proved enough to make my stomach go quiet. That is the thing about suspicion. At first it screams. Then, once it has evidence, it lowers its voice. By November, Ryan Mercer was no longer just a name in our kitchen. He was a shadow with a schedule. And I was beginning to understand why Emily wanted every door closed before the baby arrived. By December, Emily stopped pretending the distance between us was accidental. She did not announce it. She just moved through the house like a woman already packing emotionally, even when her clothes still hung beside mine in the closet. She ate dinner earlier or later than me, never with me. She took calls in the laundry room with the dryer running, as if the sound of tumbling towels could cover the truth. She kept her medical folder in her car instead of the kitchen drawer where we stored everything important. The nursery, the room I had painted with my own hands, became a place she entered alone and left quickly, like it belonged to someone else. I tried once to stand in the doorway with her and talk about the crib. She ran her hand over the railing, smiled without looking at me, and said Ryan thought we should avoid overstimulation in the baby's environment. Overstimulation. From a crib mobile. I remember staring at the little wooden stars hanging above the mattress and feeling something inside me turn colder than the tile under my feet. Ryan had opinions about her nursery now. Ryan had opinions about her diet, her stress, her sleep, her appointments, her legal protections, even the kind of music she played before bed. My name was on the mortgage, but his voice had somehow become the loudest thing in the house. I did not challenge every comment. That was the trap. If I asked too much, I was pressuring a pregnant woman. If I asked too little, I was accepting the story she was building around me. So I became quiet. Not weak. Quiet. There is a difference. Quiet lets people hear themselves. And Emily started saying more than she meant to. One Sunday afternoon, Patricia came over with a casserole dish and a stack of baby blankets from some boutique in Scottsdale. She hugged Emily, kissed her forehead, and gave me the kind of polite nod people give a waiter after complaining about the soup. During lunch, Patricia asked whether I had looked into updating my life insurance. Emily went still for half a second. I saw it. Just a flicker. Then she reached for her water. Patricia kept talking, all sweetness and poison. A responsible father plans ahead, Mark. Especially when a child is coming. I asked what kind of planning she meant. She smiled. The house. Support. Protection for Emily. Things that should be settled before the birth, not after. Before the birth, not after. The phrase landed too cleanly, like it had been rehearsed. That night, Emily stood at the kitchen sink rinsing plates we had barely used, and said maybe we should talk about separation. Her voice was calm. Too calm. She said pregnancy had changed her. She said she needed peace. She said we had grown apart. Every sentence sounded reasonable by itself. Together, they sounded like a hallway leading to a locked door. I asked if there was someone else. Her shoulders tightened, but she did not turn around. Do not do that, Mark, she said. Do not make this ugly. Ugly. That word again. As if the ugliness was not the secret, but my willingness to notice it. 2 days later, she handed me the first draft of the agreement. Not formal yet, she said. Just something to help us be adults. I read it at the kitchen counter while she watched me over a cup of tea. It asked for temporary use of the house, medical coverage, prenatal expenses, future child support, and a written acknowledgement that I would not dispute paternity. There it was. The locked door. I looked up and asked who wrote it. Emily blinked once. A family friend helped. I asked if the family friend's name was Ryan Mercer. The teacup touched the saucer too hard. Not enough to break. Just enough to tell me I had found the right wall to push on. The first draft was not a request. It was a rehearsal. I understood that the moment Emily took the pages back from my hand and slid them into a folder like a cashier closing a drawer. She did not argue when I asked about Ryan. She did something worse. She smiled with pity, as if my question proved everything she wanted people to believe about me. Mark, she said, you are exhausted. You are seeing enemies because this is hard. That sentence was polished smooth. No fingerprints. No rough edges. I almost admired it. Almost. For the next week, she became careful. Too careful. The phone calls disappeared. The medical folder vanished from her car. The sticky note with Ryan's name came off the refrigerator. She started texting me updates again, but they were clean little messages with no soul in them. Baby is fine. Appointment went well. Resting now. Each one felt less like communication and more like documentation. She was building a version of herself for someone else to read later. The patient mother. The abandoned wife. The reasonable woman trying to protect her child from an unstable husband. I could feel the frame being built around me, one sentence at a time. Then Patricia called and invited me to dinner at our own house. That was how she said it. We should all sit down at your house, Mark. Like she owned the walls because her daughter was pregnant inside them. I asked who all met. She paused just long enough to answer without answering. People who care about Emily. Thursday night, I drove home from a site inspection near Mesa with dust on my boots and a strange calm in my chest. The winter sun had already dropped behind the rooftops, leaving the neighborhood washed in porch lights and Christmas decorations. Our lemon tree had tiny white bulbs wrapped around it. I remembered putting them there 2 weeks earlier while Emily stood in the doorway telling me they were crooked. It is funny what your mind keeps when your life is coming apart. Crooked lights. Dry hands. The smell of asphalt cooling after sunset. When I opened the front door, the house smelled like Patricia's casserole and expensive perfume. Emily was in the dining room wearing that white dress, one hand resting on her belly. Patricia stood behind her. Emily's older sister, Lauren, sat near the window with her purse in her lap and judgment already on her face. Beside her was a man I had never met, mid-50s, gray sport coat, open laptop, leather folder. He stood when I entered and introduced himself as Daniel Price, a legal consultant helping Emily through a sensitive transition. Legal consultant, not attorney. I heard the missing word immediately. Daniel shook my hand with the soft grip of a man who expected paperwork to do his pushing for him. Dinner was on the table, but no one had touched it. That told me everything. This was not a meal. It was a room staged to look like one. Emily started with a trembling voice. She said she did not feel safe emotionally. She said my questions had become harmful. She said the baby needed peace. Patricia picked up the rhythm from there. Good men do not drag pregnant women through suspicion. Lauren added that stress could affect the child. Daniel opened his folder and slid the final agreement across the table. 26 pages. Yellow tabs. Signature lines. I sat down slowly and read every word while they watched me like a jury waiting for a confession. The house was silent except for Patricia's bracelet tapping against her glass. Then I reached page 4 and found the sentence I knew would be there. No genetic testing shall be requested, required, or pursued by either party at any time. I looked up. Emily's eyes did not move. I asked, "Why is that line so important?" Daniel cleared his throat and said it was standard language to prevent harassment. Standard. Another smooth word hiding a sharp edge. I nodded once, then turned the page back toward them. If it is standard, I said, then removing it should not be a problem. That was when Emily's hand tightened around her water glass, and the whole room stopped pretending this was about peace. Emily's grip on the glass told me more than her words ever had. Her fingers pressed so hard against the rim that her knuckles went pale, and for 1 second, the careful woman across from me was gone. In her place sat someone cornered by a sentence she thought I would never read closely enough to question. Daniel Price adjusted his glasses and tried to recover the room. "Mark," he said, "the purpose of that clause is to create stability for the child." Stability. I looked at the pages in front of me, at the yellow tabs lined up like little warning signs, and felt something almost peaceful settle in my chest. People think betrayal feels like fire. Sometimes it feels like ice water. Clear. Cold. Honest. I turned to Emily and asked again, "Why is genetic testing off the table?" Patricia made a sharp sound behind her teeth. "Because it is insulting," she said. "Because it is cruel. Because my daughter should not have to defend herself while carrying your child." Your child. She said it like a command. Like if she pushed the words hard enough, they would become legal fact. I did not answer Patricia. I kept my eyes on Emily. She had rehearsed tears earlier. I could see the path they were supposed to take. A soft tremble. A hand on the stomach. A wounded look toward her sister. But now the tears would not come because panic had taken their place. Lauren leaned forward and said I was making everyone uncomfortable. That almost made me smile. Not because anything was funny, but because discomfort was finally sitting in the right chair. Daniel slid the pen toward me. "Let us not spiral," he said. "You can sign tonight, and any remaining concerns can be handled respectfully later." Later. That was the trap wearing a nicer shirt. Later meant after my name was attached. Later meant after the court saw me as the father on paper. Later meant after the story had hardened around me like dried concrete. I picked up the pen. Emily exhaled so softly I might have missed it if the room had not been silent. Patricia's shoulders lowered. Lauren looked away, already bored with the ending she thought she knew. I held the pen above the signature line and watched Emily's face. For a heartbeat, she looked relieved. Not grateful. Relieved. There is a difference, and it is a mile wide. Then I said, "I only have one question before I sign." Daniel nodded too quickly. "Of course." I placed the tip of the pen against the paper, but did not move it. "Did Ryan Mercer tell you I would be too afraid to ask for this?" The name landed in the room like a dropped plate. No one breathed right. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Patricia's eyes snapped toward her daughter. Lauren sat back slowly. Daniel stopped pretending to take notes. I had expected denial. I had expected outrage. I had expected Emily to call me paranoid, controlling, cruel, every word she had been stacking for weeks. But pressure does strange things to rehearse people. It makes them reach for the wrong line. Emily's face flushed, and she said, "Ryan said you would use it to destroy me." 6 words. That was all it took. Not Dr. Mercer. Not the specialist. Ryan. The room heard it. Even Patricia heard it. The casserole on the table had gone cold. The candles had burned low, and somewhere in the hallway the clock kept ticking like it wanted to count the damage. I set the pen down. Carefully, quietly. Emily realized what she had said a moment too late. Her hand went to her mouth, then dropped to her stomach, as if she could hide behind the baby from the name she had just put between us. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the clause again. No genetic testing. No questions. No truth. Daniel cleared his throat, but nothing came out clean. Patricia whispered Emily's name, not as comfort, but as warning. That was when the doorbell rang, the same clean chime that had cut through the house earlier. This time, nobody looked relieved. I did. For a moment, nobody moved toward the door. The sound had been small, just one chime, but it changed the shape of the room. Emily stared at me as if I had somehow reached outside the house and pulled the future onto the porch. Patricia whispered, "Who is that?" I stood slowly, leaving the unsigned agreement on the table with the pen lying across it like a line I had refused to cross. Daniel Price half rose from his chair, then seemed to remember he had no authority to stop anything. I walked down the hallway past the framed photos Emily had not bothered to take down yet. Our wedding in Sedona. Our first Christmas in the house. A picture of us standing in the empty nursery with paint on our jeans. Each frame looked innocent from a distance. Up close, all I could see were the things I had missed. When I opened the front door, Thomas Caldwell stood under the porch light in a gray suit, holding a sealed folder against his chest. He was in his early 60s, tall, white-haired, and calm in the way only a man who has spent 30 years watching people lie under fluorescent lights can be calm. "Good evening, Mark," he said. I stepped aside. "Come in." Behind me, I heard Emily make a small sound. Not a word. More like the air leaving a tire. Caldwell entered without hurry, wiped his shoes on the mat, and followed me into the dining room. He did not look surprised by the faces around the table. That was one of the reasons I hired him. Surprise is expensive. Preparation is cheaper. Patricia straightened like she was about to scold a bank manager. "Who are you?" Caldwell placed his business card on the table, angled it toward Daniel, and said, "Thomas Caldwell, family law attorney for Mr. Reynolds." Daniel's face changed first. The confidence drained out of him slowly, not all at once. He picked up the card, read it, then looked at the agreement in front of me as if it had become radioactive. Caldwell set his folder beside the cold casserole and glanced at the signature page. "Has my client signed anything tonight?" Daniel cleared his throat. "We were simply having a private family discussion." Caldwell nodded once. "With a legal document, signature tabs, and a paternity waiver. That is an interesting definition of family discussion." No one answered. Emily finally found her voice. "Mark, this is unnecessary." Caldwell turned to her, polite but flat. "Mrs. Reynolds, what is unnecessary is asking a man to waive genetic testing while simultaneously seeking legal acknowledgement and financial responsibility before the child is born." The room went still. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just still. Then he opened the folder. One page came out first. A notice of representation. He placed it in front of Daniel. The second page was a written objection to the agreement. The third was a formal request to preserve all communications related to the pregnancy, medical billing, and any third-party involvement in drafting the separation terms. Emily's face went pale. Patricia grabbed the back of her chair. Caldwell kept going. He laid down a printed copy of the Scottsdale Women's Center billing statement, the one with the estimated timeline. Then came screenshots of appointment confirmations, parking receipts, and a calendar showing my Denver assignment. Nothing illegal. Nothing theatrical. Just facts. Clean facts. The kind that do not care who cries first. Daniel raised both hands slightly. "I was not aware Mr. Reynolds had retained counsel." Caldwell looked at him. "That is why pressure tactics are risky, Mr. Price. They assume the quiet man is uninformed." I watched Emily then. Not Patricia. Not Daniel. Emily. Her eyes moved from the documents to me. And for the first time in months, she looked at me like I was not furniture in her story. I was a person she had underestimated. Caldwell placed the final document on the table, separate from the rest. Petition for genetic testing upon birth, with notice that no voluntary acknowledgement of paternity would be signed in advance. His voice stayed even. "My client is prepared to cooperate with lawful proceedings. He is not prepared to sign a lie for anyone's convenience." The sentence settled over the table like dust after a demolition. Emily whispered my name, but it did not sound like love. It sounded like a locked door, realizing the key was on the wrong side. Emily whispered my name again, softer this time. But softness was not the same as truth. I looked at her across the dining room table, at the white dress, the carefully arranged papers, the cold dinner, the candles burning down to crooked little pools of wax. For months, I had imagined this moment would feel like an explosion. It did not. It felt like standing on a job site after the dust settled, looking at a cracked foundation and finally admitting the building could not be saved. Caldwell gathered the unsigned agreement and slid it back toward Daniel Price. My client will not sign this document tonight or any version of it that waives his right to the truth, he said. Daniel nodded without looking at Emily. Patricia found her voice, but it had lost its sharpness. You are punishing a pregnant woman, she said. I turned to her then. No, Patricia. I am refusing to be used as a solution to a secret. That was the first sentence I had said all night that sounded like it belonged to me. Emily's eyes filled, but I had learned to watch timing more than tears. Tears before evidence are emotion. Tears after evidence are strategy. Maybe that sounds cold. Maybe it is. But a man can only be cornered so many times before he stops apologizing for wanting a door. Emily put both hands on the table and said the baby needed a father. Her voice trembled around the word father like she was trying to make it sacred enough to stop questions. I nodded because that part was true. Every child deserves a father. But fatherhood cannot be stolen with a signature. It cannot be assigned by fear, paperwork, or a room full of people trying to shame a man into silence. I told her, if this child is mine, I will show up in every legal and moral way a father should. I will pay what I owe. I will be present. I will not punish a baby for adult choices. Then I looked at the clause again, the one that tried to bury genetic testing forever. But I will not sign my name over a question you are this afraid to answer. The room went quiet enough for the air conditioner to sound loud. Caldwell closed his folder. Daniel packed his laptop with hands that had lost their smooth rhythm. Lauren stared at the table. Patricia stood behind Emily, but she no longer looked like a judge. She looked like a mother realizing she might not know the whole story she had defended. I took off my wedding ring slowly. Not to be cruel. Not for drama. I placed it beside the pen because both had become symbols of promises that required truth to mean anything. Emily watched it land on the table, and something in her face folded inward. I did not ask her for a confession. I did not need one at that table. The legal process would ask the questions now, and unlike me, it would not be talked out of hearing the answers. Caldwell opened the front door for me, and the December air came in cool and dry, carrying the faint smell of dust and neighborhood fireplaces. I stepped onto the porch with my work boots, my tired hands, and a future that no longer had to pretend. Behind me, Emily said, "Mark, please." I stopped, but I did not turn around. Please was a word she had saved until control stopped working. I walked to my truck under the crooked white lights on the lemon tree and sat behind the wheel for a long moment before starting the engine. The house glowed behind me like a photograph of someone else's life. I thought about the nursery, the tiny wooden stars, the stuffed fox still hidden in its bag, and the child who might or might not carry my blood. I prayed for that baby anyway. That surprised me. It also steadied me. The next morning, Caldwell called before sunrise. His voice was calm, but there was weight underneath it. "Mark," he said, "the hospital records request triggered a response from Scottsdale Women's Center. Ryan Mercer is not just involved as a specialist. He is listed as an emergency contact on one of Emily's private intake forms." I stared through the windshield at the pink Arizona dawn and felt the last piece slide into place. The truth had not finished arriving. It had only just opened the door.